Welcome to American Echo's Vault. There are moments in history that look small at first, but later change the direction of an entire nation. The Boston Tea Party was one of those moments. On the night of December 16, 1773, a group of American colonists walked toward Boston Harbor. They were angry, frustrated, and tired of being ignored by the British government. By the end of that night, hundreds of chests of tea would be dumped into the water, and the relationship between Britain and its American colonies would never be the same again. But the Boston Tea Party was not really about tea. It was about power. It was about rights. And most of all, it was about whether ordinary people had a voice in the decisions that controlled their lives. To understand why this event mattered so much, we have to go back to the years before it happened. In the 1760s and early 1770s, the 13 American colonies were still part of the British Empire. Many colonists considered themselves loyal British subjects. They did not originally want independence. They wanted respect, fair treatment, and representation. After the French and Indian War, Britain was left with a large debt. To pay that debt, the British government started placing taxes on the colonies. Laws like the Stamp Act, Townshend Acts, and Tea Act created growing anger across America. The colonists believed Britain had no right to tax them because they had no elected representatives in the British Parliament. This idea became famous through the phrase, "no taxation without representation." The Tea Act of 1773 made the situation worse. Britain gave the British East India Company special advantages to sell tea directly to the colonies. This made British tea cheaper, but many colonists saw it as a trick. They believed that if they bought the tea, they would be accepting Britain's right to tax them. To them, drinking that tea meant surrendering their political rights. In Boston, tension reached a breaking point. 3 ships carrying British tea arrived in the harbor: the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver. Colonists demanded that the ships return to Britain without unloading the tea. But the royal governor of Massachusetts, Thomas Hutchinson, refused to allow the ships to leave. For days the city waited. Meetings were held. Crowds gathered. Anger grew stronger. Then, on December 16, 1773, thousands of colonists met at the Old South Meeting House. After it became clear that the tea would not be sent back, a group of men took action. Some of them disguised themselves as Mohawk Native Americans. This disguise was not simply for hiding their identity. It also symbolized that they were no longer acting as loyal British subjects. They were beginning to see themselves as Americans. That night, the men boarded the ships in Boston Harbor. They did not steal the tea. They did not destroy the ships. They did not harm the crew. Their target was specific: the tea. They broke open 342 chests and threw the tea into the water. In today's money, the destroyed tea was worth a huge amount. It was a direct attack on British authority and British economic power. When news reached Britain, the government was furious. King George III and Parliament believed Boston had gone too far. They decided the colonies needed to be punished. In response, Britain passed a series of harsh laws that the colonists called the Intolerable Acts. These laws closed Boston Harbor, limited self-government in Massachusetts, and increased British control. Britain hoped this would isolate Boston and scare the other colonies into obedience. But the plan backfired. Instead of dividing the colonies, the punishment united them. People in other colonies saw what happened to Boston and realized that the same thing could happen to them. Food, supplies, and support were sent to Massachusetts. The Boston Tea Party had turned a local protest into a colonial crisis. It helped push the colonies closer together. In 1774, representatives from different colonies gathered at the First Continental Congress. They discussed how to respond to British actions and how to defend colonial rights. This was a major step toward unity. Before the Boston Tea Party, many colonists were angry, but still hoped for a peaceful solution. After Britain's harsh response, more people began to believe that compromise might no longer be possible. The event also changed the way protest was understood in America. It showed that colonists were willing to take bold action when they believed their rights were being violated. It showed that economic protest could become political resistance, and it showed that a symbolic act could inspire a movement far bigger than the people who carried it out. The Boston Tea Party did not start the Revolutionary War by itself, but it helped set the stage. Less than 2 years later, fighting broke out at Lexington and Concord. The American Revolution had begun. What makes the Boston Tea Party so important is not just the tea thrown into the harbor, it is what that tea represented. It represented a people refusing to accept laws made without their consent. It represented resistance against unfair power. It represented the growing belief that government should answer to the people. The Boston Tea Party changed America forever because it moved the colonies from protest toward revolution. It reminded the world that sometimes history does not begin with kings, armies, or grand speeches. Sometimes it begins with ordinary people standing together and saying, "Enough." This was American Echoes Vault. Subscribe for more powerful stories from America's past.